I'm Tassinix. Welcome back to another Datacron Set Guide review. I'll be breaking down Set 23, Cosmic Plunder. As always, let's go ahead and get started by looking at the stats on this set, then we'll cover the 3, 6, 9 abilities, and then finally my recommendations. So, stat-wise, we've got crit damage, tenacity, health, protection, crit chance, health steal, and crit avoidance. So some generically useful stats here like health, protection, crit damage. We can always find a good use for those. Tenacity is less common and always valuable, particularly maybe for your Night Sisters counters to Jabba. Your counter to that if you're setting your own Jabba, something to think about. Anyways, what else we got in here? You've got crit chance, which is going to be great for a lot of people. Many folks don't have depth on crit chance sets or strong crit chance secondaries, so you'll be getting a lot of relief from this. Crit avoidance is actually very uncommon on Datacron stats and will be valuable, I think, maybe for 2 or 3 teams. It might be worth trying, I could say. Health Steal is available here and is probably the weakest of these stats. There's only a couple of fights where I can think that would be very useful. For the most part, you're picking a counter where the mechanics of it should work out such that you probably don't need Health Steal. So limited use there. But you can stack these in pretty decent quantity, from the 4 to 5 and 7 to 8 levels. Good stuff there. All right, let's take a look at alignments. We'll cover light side first. So, yeah, there's 5 of these abilities, but really there's only 3 worth looking at, nevertheless. First one is light side allies recover 2% health whenever they critically hit an enemy. Next one is whenever light side allies inflict a debuff on an enemy, they deal damage to that enemy equal to 2% of that enemy's max health. Maybe a couple of teams that can make good use of this, like Saw Gerrera, right? The next ability is the first time each light side ally reaches 75%, 50%, and 25% health, grant them protection up 50% for 2 turns, which can't be dispelled or prevented. Like the second best ability here. A pretty solid default choice for any of your light side teams on defense. This next ability is at the beginning of their turn, light side allies have plus 25% chance to dispel all debuffs on themselves. Maybe if it's a team where you have characters like RJT that already have self-dispelling as a default and you can stack this alongside it, maybe if there's something to it, but otherwise, probably a pretty weak ability. And last, but certainly not least, light side allies start the battle with plus 25% turn meter. This is going to be the default for all of your light sides from this set. You might pick up a couple of these protection ups, for the odd team where you might not want turn meter on the level 3, like your Sir Junda. And then you might have 1 or 2 of these for Saw Gerrera with the max health level 3, but otherwise your default's going to be this turn meter. Super strong. Alright, over to Dark Side. Whenever Dark Side allies start their turn, for each enemy with fewer than 4 debuffs, that ally gains 30% potency until the end of turn. Maybe if you're building one of these crons for Dr. Aphra. Maybe something for General Grievous to it, but not that great, especially in comparison to the next one. Whenever Darkside allies inflict at least 4 debuffs in a turn, they have a 10% chance stacking to reduce their cooldowns by 1 for each debuff they inflicted that turn, limit once per turn. So, probably not as good in 3 versus 3, but in 5 versus 5, there's a bunch of Darkside teams that are rife with debuffs, Sith Empire, Inquisitorius, just to name a couple. Whenever Darkside allies are dispelled, at the end of that turn, they gain potency up and tenacity up for 2 turns. You might find situationally useful in this, but the condition of Darkside allies needing to be dispelled makes it, limited use to get that potency up tenacity. Whenever Darkside allies are evaded by an enemy, that ally gains accuracy up for 2 turns, and they inflict evasion down for 2 turns on that enemy, which can't be evaded. You might have one just in case there's some weird situation where you're fighting a turbo dodge team, but there isn't dodge on Datacron, so that really shouldn't happen for them. Last one is whenever Darkside allies grant a buff to another ally, that ally recovers 3% health and protection. Just, so-so. So most of these are kind of underwhelming. Out of the five, certainly the potential for cooldown reduction is the most promising. All right, faction wise, starting with resistance, possible mechanics. Whenever a debuff on an enemy expires, resistance allies gain 2% turn meter, doubled if that debuff was dispelled by an enemy. Will be the default choice for, your Finzori team, right? Really good for that situation. Next one is the first time each resistance ally falls below 50% health, all resistance allies reduce their cooldowns by 1 and gain 10% turn meter. I don't know. You might think of something situationally interesting with that. But for the resistance, I would much rather have this ramping turn meter or the next one, ramping offense. Whenever a debuff on an enemy expires, resistance allies gain 2% offense, doubled if that debuff was dispelled until the end of battle. So, yeah, I mean, your Finzori team already is about having kind of a turn meter loop. You generate a ton of turn meter. So it makes sense to me to sustain that as much as possible and choose the turn meter for most situations. But like I said, if you were going to make like a Scav Raycron for a Seer Junda team, you really would want to avoid stuff that's mostly doing turn meter. I'd rather have the offense stack for her in that situation, but that's about it. Next one. Whenever resistance allies grant a buff to another ally, that ally gains 10% turn meter, limit once per turn per ally. Okay. I'd rather have the first one, the 2% turn meter. That one's going to pop harder. Whenever resistance allies use a special ability during their turn, they stun target enemy for 1 turn, which can't be evaded or resisted. This is generally really powerful whenever you have that unresistible stun attached to any faction. You might say that's probably your default choice for your resistance teams. I think the turn meter is probably mine. But any of those three, I wouldn't say you're crazy to run with. I think for most teams, though, the turn meter or the offense would be the way to go with the 2%. Okay. Inquisitorius. Yeah, so we got a long text, and this is definitely the favorite of the five, but here we go. Whenever an Inquisitorius ally inflicts a stack of Purge, they gain 5% defense, offense, and tenacity, stacking for 1 turn. Whenever a stack of Purge is consumed or dispelled on an enemy, expose them for 1 turn. Whenever an Inquisitorius ally uses a basic ability against an enemy inflicted with a stack of Purge, a random other Inquisitorius ally assists, dealing 5% bonus damage per stack of Purge, and then they inflict a stack of Purge, max of 6, on target enemy, which can't be evaded. So it's a bunch of good stuff. You do have a brief stacking offense, but then you also have the occasion for this expose and the frequent assist out of turn, which is great. We've already got that with Seventh Sister. Now we kind of get to double up on that effect. Next ability. Whenever an Inquisitorius ally deals damage to an enemy and no other enemy is marked, inflict marked for 1 turn on the target enemy, which can't be evaded or resisted. Whenever an enemy is so yeah, I mean that one seems kind of good. The problem is that it would be nice to be able to have surety that we could always go after our primary target and then hit them and then force them to be marked. My worry is if you run with this as a standard, if you end up having to hit a tank for any reason, now you've just marked the tank. Great, now you're stuck on a tank. Not helpful. So next one is whenever an enemy is defeated by an Inquisitorius ally, that enemy can't be revived. You might think of situationally that. I don't know of many matchups where I'm really resenting the revive of an enemy team that I'm doing. Even if you're doing something like Inquisitorius versus Leia, that can go bad for Inquisitorius. But generally, if I've gotten all the sides out, I'm just timing it out before she ults. Something like that. When you're not going to win anyway, type of thing. All right. Whenever an Inquisitorius ally deals damage to an enemy and no other enemy is blinded, inflict blind for 2 turns on the target enemy, which can't be resisted. Yeah, so the blind is kind of like the marked one. It lasts for 2 turns instead of the 1, which is okay. The blind is just mediocre. If historically, blind has been good for factions on defense when that faction might otherwise be vulnerable to Sidious solo, Wampa solo, stuff like that, right? Otherwise, blind is pretty mediocre. All right, last one. Whenever Inquisitorious allies start their turn with fewer than 2 buffs, all other allies gain 15% turn meter. On its face, this one seems like it could be really strong. The problem is that Inquisitorious has a ton of buffs flying around, and then when you're thinking about how Marok is technically an Inquisitor, he's mostly rolling with Balin, and that team also has a respectable number of buffs going around. So this one seems underwhelming in practice. All right, next faction is Night Sisters. First ability is whenever Night Sister allies are revived, they gain protection up over time 25% for 2 turns and 25% turn meter, and reduce their cooldowns by 1. This is maybe strong if you were in a middle part of the game where you might actually be using Mother Talzin on defense. You know, if that were the case, this could be strong for you. Otherwise, don't really care for it. Next ability. At the start of each Night Sister ally's turn, if they have not taken damage since their last turn, they gain offense up and critical chance up for 1 turn. Love the buffs, but the condition is unlikely. Pretty easy to do damage to Night Sister. Maybe not damage that matters, but damage. Third ability. At the start of their first turn, Night Sister allies gain offense equal to 400% of their current defense until the end of battle. They then lose 50% defense until the end of battle. So, I think this is probably one of the strongest abilities for this faction, whether that's for Mother Talzin or for Great Mothers. Yes, you are more squishy. You are losing more defense, but you're not really modding most of these characters for defense, so I feel like the loss is mitigated by it. And I'd be willing to risk it myself. Fourth ability. Whenever Night Sister allies stun an enemy, they gain speed up and offense up for 2 turns, and inflict expose for 2 turns at the end of that turn, which can't be evaded. Seems kind of nice, but not every character can stun, and so you're going to have some uptime on some characters for this ability. Less impressive. Last ability, whenever Night Sister allies attack out a turn, they have a 25% chance to remove 10% turn meter from the target. So, specifically, mostly good with Mother Talzin lead, right? When you've got your allies dead and you're just calling them back from the dead and they're attacking, this would trigger that condition, I believe. So when you're getting a lot of attacks out of turn, maybe some value comes out of it. But the fact is, it's just a 25% chance to remove only 10% turn meter, so pretty weak. All right, and then Ewok faction. First ability, whenever Ewok allies attack out of turn, each Ewok ally gains 2% offense, stacking maximum of 100% until the end of battle. Generally a very good fit for any faction. Next ability, at the start of battle, Ewok allies gain Retribution for 3 turns, which can't be dispelled. I actually really like this if you were so inclined to put an Ewok team on defense. I think that that's only really viable, again, in like a middle or early part of the game. I don't really think Ewoks have much of a spot a higher end board. All right, next is at the end of their turn, Ewok allies recover 50% protection if they inflicted at least 5 debuffs that turn. Very weak. Only a couple characters could inflict that number of debuffs at all. Next is whenever an Ewok ally defeats an enemy, they take a bonus turn. This is a classic win harder ability. So if you've already killed the character, you're well on your way. I don't think giving just that one character a bonus turn is going to be that much of a swing for your match. And last, at the start of each turn, if non-galactic legend Ewok allies have 50% or more turn meter, damage they receive is reduced by 75% until the end of the turn. Honestly, between that or the Retribution, probably this one, the damage reduction, would be better at holding on defense, I think. So we'll see what you guys say in the comments, but that one's probably really good for defense. The 2% stacking offense would be the best one for attack. I also believe there is a Chief Chirpa level 9 that does that trick where if you leave him last, or wait, I don't think if you leave him last, I think if you don't leave him for last, if you kill him at any other point before he's the last character, He'll revive other allies, give them 100% turn meter and 100% bonus offense. We'll cover it in a second. But specifically, if you wanted to plug and play Chief Chirpa with that Kron on teams to get use out of that gimmick, this ability, this last ability, would be the best one to have him stick around as long as possible. He is much of a nuisance. All right, let's get into the character abilities, level 9s. So, if it's, I think just for brevity's sake, if it's really poor, I think I'll just say it's poor and keep on moving. So Talia's is very poor. Third Sister is bad compared to the other options for Inquisitorius, so I really won't cover it. You're also not stacking potency on her, so Marok. Whenever Marok deals damage to an enemy, remove 25% turn meter from that enemy. So I like that because whenever he deals damage, covers his AoE. So an AoE 25% turn meter removal, I will have that, thank you. Yes, it can be resisted, so I guess to get the most use out of it, you'd want to have him on a team where his stuff isn't going to be resisted, or you're putting some potency on this. Walk Scout is poor. Resistance Pilot is okay. Okay. Probably not as great as other options. Chief Chirpa. Yes, the first time Chief Chirpa is defeated, if there is at least one other active ally, revive all other defeated allies, and other allies recover, plus 100% health and protection, gain 100% turn meter and 100% offense until the end of battle. So, yeah, that's that gimmick that we saw in the most recent Jedi Vanguard set with the Xeris. Now they've got it applied to Chief Chirpa. Okay, you might find some use for it, but I don't think it's a super high priority. Right. Ninth Sister. Possible Ninth Sister mechanics. At the start of the encounter, all Inquisitorius allies have plus 200% max health. They're immune to ability block. Ninth Sister deals 20% bonus true damage based on her max health with her basic ability if the target enemy is inflicted with Purge. If any enemy has 6 stacks of Purge when Ninth Sister is defeated for the first time, she consumes all stacks of Purge from a random enemy with 6 stacks of Purge, recovers 100% max health and max protection, and removes 50% turn meter from all enemies. Okay. So we've seen this one before, and you're usually dropping out 8th Brother to substitute her into your main Inquisitorius team. This gives a lot for defensive viability of Inquisitors, which is otherwise getting dunked on by by a number of things, right? So good call to run with that. Man, I got it. All right, next one is Rey Jedi Training. This one is poor. Second Sister. Whenever an enemy is inflicted with a debuff, Second Sister gains 5% offense stacking until they are defeated. She's usually overlooked as a character, and I was overlooking her myself. A viewer recommended that I consider how this Kron could go pretty crazy on attack, when you're controlling her. And I did concede. I think that's a really solid option. So I think Ninth Sisters, you could think of a couple of matchups where having the added health and the ability block immunity would be helpful for you on offense. But I mostly think that this Second Sister would be better to use on offense. Because you are just absolutely going to destroy people on an Inquisitorius team. Okay, Paplu, yeah, it's okay, but less interesting than other abilities. Veteran Smuggler Chewbacca. Whenever another ally uses an ability on their turn, Veteran Smuggler Chewbacca assists limit once per turn, dealing 50% more damage. So it isn't faction limited, and, if you've got this character Relic 7+ with, offense, primary, arrow, and cross with like a crit damage triangle, yeah, this guy can do insane damage. He's got quite a bit of base damage on him. So increasing that by 50%, and having that assist any ally at all, not faction restricted, you might find a use for it. I still think it's fairly low priority. All right, Logray is a poor one. We'll skip it. Rey Scavenger. Yeah, she's finally getting a taste of the good life. Rey Scavenger deals 25%, plus 25% more damage per relic amplifier level on all allies, herself included. I actually did just take her up to Relic 9, just to take full advantage of this. And also, now I've got the pilot for that Ray Millennium Falcon at Relic 9. I'll enjoy that long term. All right. So this one's one of the more fun ones out of this set. It's not often that this character gets any play at all, so you can't completely neglect her, because if she's taking turns, she's doing catastrophic damage. All right, old Daka, it's okay. The first time Daka goes below 100% health, recover 100% health and protection, and gain 100% turn meter. I think this is maybe more useful to you on offense, where the AI might not necessarily just focus her down early, immediately trigger this, and make it feel like a waste, you know? Otherwise, pretty poor. Night Sister Acolyte is whatever. You get to stack Armor Shred, but where are you really wanting Acolyte as opposed to a better Night Sister on that team, just for the sake of having Armor Shred? Mother Talzin. Whenever Mother Talzin uses a basic ability on their turn, other allies gain plus 25% turn meter. Kind of ridiculous. I think specifically once she's dead, her basic ability, when she's called back to assist by Marin, like versus Jabba, that won't activate this, which is good for us. But yeah, this is otherwise kind of fun. You know, if you're not doing Jabba, this is a really fun ability to use with Mother Talzin. You'll get use out of that. It's okay. Grand Inquisitors is poor, compared to other options. Night Trooper, this is a good one. We used to have this some time ago, and it's made another appearance. At the start of battle, Night Trooper gains 75% potency and 25 speed until the end of the encounter. Whenever an enemy is inflicted with a stack of Blight, they inflict themselves with another stack, which can't be copied or evaded until the end of the encounter or until they recover their health. Whenever an enemy that already had Blight is inflicted with another stack of Blight by an ally, inflict Blight on another random enemy that doesn't have it, which can't be copied, evaded, or resisted, until the end of the encounter or until they fully recover their health. Whenever Night Trooper uses Shambling Shot, they gain an additional 3 stacks of Blight, which can't be copied or evaded until the end of the encounter. And whenever an ally or an enemy gains or is inflicted with Blight, Night Trooper recovers 20% health and gains 25% offense per stack for 2 turns. This is just going to make him fly off the handle. Blight is tied into his damage, and then you have offense ramping besides. You're giving yourself more Blight, you're spreading more Blight, you're increasing your potency so that you have greater probability of your Blight landing. It's one of the more exciting level 9s out of this set. So worthwhile getting for your Great Mother's team. Rose Tico, this is a really good one. Right up there with the Scavray, I would say. Whenever Rose uses Dauntless Bravery, inflict Expose on the target enemy for 2 turns, which can't be evaded or resisted. Whenever Rose uses Shock Prod Strike, when the stun is dispelled or expires, inflict Death Mark for 1 turn. Can't be evaded or resisted. Whenever Rose uses a basic ability on an enemy with Expose, which is going to happen all the time, dispel all buffs on the enemy and debuffs on herself, recover 100% protection, and gain 5% critical damage. Stacking. Maximum. So, your Finzori team is usually featuring Rose anyway. I am assuming that we're talking about Rose with her Omicron. If you have been resistant about picking this one up, get it, resistant, and you haven't otherwise applied it, it's good in any season in the 5 vs 5 team. Right now, with this level 9, I think it's probably a leading contender for your 3 vs 3 team as well, like Finn, Zori, Rose, instead of having Resistance Hero Finn. Again, only with the Omicron applied to her, I would also say go for it. So yeah, if you've been toying around with the idea of applying it and just hadn't felt like it was necessary, it's still probably not necessary, but wow, you're going to capitalize on that Omicron really well with this. I like it. And then last, Princess Nisa. Whenever Nisa critically hits an enemy, she gains 10% critical damage, defense penetration, and offense stacking, maximum of 200% until the end of battle. Pretty good for her, but again, I don't think any of the Ewok-specific prawns are a priority. They're not really a serious team in the end game, and whatever these abilities are that they've added for Ewok, I don't think elevates them enough. Even with 25% turn meter, there's enough ways to get around that. So maybe if you wanted to make an Ewok team for offense and game that 25% turn meter, you might get some value out of this level 9. Otherwise, I would get all of the other factions squared away before I go after Ewok crons. And even then, I kind of use these at Ewok specifically if you're building up in this faction. They'd be kind of like my stat sticks, right? Like, even if I'm never going to use the Ewok faction, if I have a light side 25% turn meter with all health on it, I can use that with Ahsoka. I can use that with Leia, right? If it's all protection, I can use it with JML, so on and so forth. So I plan to build up my light side crons that are stat sticks, kind of having the Ewok factions. I'm not really worried about it. All right, and that brings us full circle. So let's go ahead and take a look at my specific recommendation. Okay, now this is already available on my Discord as a still image, but I'll show it here, and if you want to take a screen grab, you're okay. All right, so here's the early winners for Inquisitorius. By the way, I have it bolded for ones that I think are priority. And yes, I think all of these are reasonable priority for Inquisitorius. So, for any of these Inquisitorius crons, you're going to rock the cooldown reduction level 3. For level 6, for the Ninth Sister and Second Sister cron, I really do think the long text is the only solid choice. For Marok, mostly running with Balin, the long text, just for his own sake, is okay. It's harmless to you, and it gives some benefit to Marok. So it's all right. The mark is the risky choice. You could employ that mark to make sure that you stick to a priority target with your Balin team, but if you get stuck behind a tank and end up having to hit the tank, now you've just marked a tank, and now you're stuck hitting it. Have a sense of caution about it, but it's not something I'd throw out all the way. As far as stats go, for the Ninth Sister Cron, you do get that 200% bonus health. So if you're mostly setting it on defense, I could see you leaning into some serious health on the Cron, right? Otherwise, crit damage is a generically great fit for Inquisitors. And in fact, that is my recommendation for the other two. And if you missed my comment about it earlier, I was saying that, Marok going with Balin, Ninth Sister, I can mostly see being used with Inquisitorius to make them strong on defense, viable on defense. The Second Sister Cron, I think, is only good if you're using them on offense. Because I don't expect Second Sister's AI to target and make the most out of her enhanced abilities. Right? Next is Resistance Faction. So the first one for Rose is going to be 25% turn meter on the level 3, the 2% stacking or ramping turn meter on level 6, Rose level 9, of course, and then just crit damage. This is a team that generates turn meter on critical strikes. You're already set up to do crits, get the most out of them. Next for Scavray, you could go with the protection up level 3 or the 25% turn meter. Let's put it like this. If you're going to be using Scavray mostly with under Seer Junda's lead, then roll with the protection up so that you don't have that 25% turn meter boosting a couple of your characters out ahead of enemy characters and costing you some of those stacking stats that come from Seer Junda's lead. All right. The level 6, I think that for her, I think for Scavray, I would say the 2% stacking offense would be more valuable to me than the 2% turn meter. You might debate that. You might think you'd still prefer the turn meter, in which case it's on here, but I still think the offense is greater than the turn meter in terms of what it brings to the table. Of course, Scavray level 9, and then again, crit damage. She's set up. Yeah, hopefully you've got her in a crit damage triangle, enough crit chance to be reliable, and then take advantage of it. All right. And this third one, I don't have it marked as priority, but you might make a couple at least one. You have 2% max health damage. In the past, some folks have used that with their Galactic Legend Leia, but I think turn meter is generally going to be preferred instead. This max health damage is going to be very useful for Saw Gerrera. And so that's why I say for level 6 and 9, doesn't really matter. The stats, though, should be health. Tons and tons of health, right? That would be the best. And then, you could decide to employ this otherwise. You could use it with your Leia. You could use it with your Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano, but again, I would make a new stat stick that had turn meter instead, because the turn meter defends against a greater variety of counters. All right, Night Sisters, yeah. So for the Night Trooper Cron, cooldown reduction, level 3, of course. Level 6 is 400% defense to offense. Level 9 is Night Trooper, and then the stats, you'll be shocked to know, are crit damage. We just need to slap people, you know? All right, and then for your Mother Talzinkron, cooldown reduction, level 3. Level 6, 400% defense to offense. Your ghosts that are going to be coming back from the dead to do basics under Mother Talzin are still going to get boosted by this. So, nice. Level 9, of course, being Mother Talzin for that turn meter for her allies. And then stats, I personally think you're going to want to stack Tenacity. Using Night Sisters versus Jabba requires that your Marin is able to survive when all the other Night Sisters are dead. She needs a lot of protection, and she needs a lot of tenacity to resist as many of those thermal detonators as possible. So I would put tenacity ahead of potency. Otherwise, potency is great to make all of the Night Sister stuff land. So I like that. All right, Ewoks. You'll see that none of these are marked as priority. So, just thinking about how to make something kind of useful elsewhere that still technically works with the Ewok faction bonuses. The level 3 protection up or 25% turn meter depends on which team you're going to end up actually slapping it on, but I think I'd probably roll turn meter myself. 75% damage reduction, specifically tied with the level 9 of Chirpa. For those reasons I mentioned earlier, he can be your gimmick character that's setting you up to have other allies revived and enhanced later in the fight if he isn't focused down super early or otherwise contained. So, if you're going to do that, maybe remod your Chief Sherpa for a lot of survivability, something like that. And then for the stats on this cron, right, again, we're just thinking about how we can use this cron outside of just Ewoks, because mostly Ewoks are meh. So health or crit damage are big value, I think, for this team. All right, the level 3 for Nisa should be just 25% turn meter straight up. I do have the level 6 saying Retribution over 2% offense. I think that last ability is also worth considering as a defensive option, but offense is better for Nisa on attack. And then, yeah, crit damage on the level 3, you'll find a use for that, I'm sure of it. Like a 25% turn meter with high health, or a blend of health and high crit damage, absolutely could see that on Galactic Legend Leia, right? Now, as far as some other notes here at the bottom, just off to the right here, I do have some note on stat sticks. For Dark Side, build up a few Datacrons where you're not really paying attention to the faction stuff, but you are looking for something with high tenacity, maybe for your Night Sisters. High health, like for Malgus. Potency, maybe for something like Afra. And then crit damage generically, right? Light side, build up stat sticks of health for the couple teams we already mentioned. Protection for stuff like JML. And of course, generically, crit damage. About the Set 23 Focus Datacrons. Priority, this is kind of arguable, I think, for this set. But I ended up ranking them this way. I think the one that you should focus on picking up first is Rolo. Get it to level 3 at least so that you can use that extremely powerful level 3 ability. Level 14 will get you the most value out of the stats on the Cron, and they are nice. They are nice. It's only the focused Datacrons can offer you defense on the stats from this set. So it'll be rare from a stat profile point of view coming soon. When this last Datacron set expires with all the defense on it, this one's going to be pretty valuable. The level 15 for Rolo herself, you can argue the value about. I don't think I'll be in a rush to use it, but probably going to be sneaky, I think, in 5 vs 5. Something like that. All right, number 2 should be Wampa. Honestly, straight up through level 8 is a no-brainer and a surefire win. You will find a use for those stats. Bane comes to mind. Malicos comes to mind. The Wampa level 9, I did have... Solo Base was kind enough to confirm this on one of my streams the other day. He did confirm that the level 9 ability will work in Grand Arena. The wording of that level 9 might lead you to suggest that that's only going to be active in TW. It is not. So you could get some value out of it if you're in a part of the game where Wampa actually sees some play. I don't get a lot of use out of that, so I don't have high hopes. Nevertheless, I do have it at level 9. All right, number 3 is the Darth Vader focused Datacron. Level 14 is going to be valuable to most players just for the stats. Level 15 is interesting. The Darth Vader team, you wonder if they're trying to harken back to that long time ago Empire Datacron that basically allowed Darth Vader to solo galactic legends. This is obviously not quite as overpowered just on its face, but it's intended to enable you to punch up into stuff because he can't be killed while his allies live. And then when his allies get killed, he gets reset and I think a bonus turn, so he gets right back into Merciless Massacre. You could see how that might be employed, but probably for poor banners. So I'm not super sure about the level 15's value. However, I do think it's going to be more interesting in 5 vs 5 than 3 vs 3. Be wrong. We'll see. Last is going to be the Sortie Kron. Great stats on the Kron, and the abilities are good. We've had this kind of droid set up in the past. It is kind of rare to have something calling out T3 and making T3 useful. I do like it, but I think it's probably just going to be a somewhat danger on 5 vs 5. I want to say it's going to be trivialized in 3 vs 3. It might be challenging on 5 vs 5, but mostly at the part of the game where I'm playing such teams, you're ending up having something overpowering take it down later. So if you were really investing into the Kron because you are a big sortie believer and you think that this is what's going to take your droid team to the next level, I wish you the best of luck, but I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't impress you from an ability mechanics point of view on that Kron. Nevertheless, the stats are solid. So I think that I will take it to at least 14, probably 15, just to have the flexibility of the Sortie 9, or level 15 ability, whatever, or 9, whatever it is. The point is that the level 9 is the least valuable thing about that to me. Everything up to that. All right, let's check these out. What was it? Okay, Sortie. Yeah, it does just go up to 9. So the stats are really nice. And as far as kicks isn't rated here because you only had this Kron if you wailed out for it. Again, the stats are kind of nice. They are. I'm not going to lie to you about it. The abilities you might find some use for, especially this level 6 with turn meter, but that'll just have to be experimented with because this pirate faction is not mature yet. I don't know that it has any good, viable teams that I'd be looking to try on defense in 3 vs 3 Grand Arena. 5 vs 5, Like we're still some number of weeks away from Hondo and Maz. We don't have either of the good pirate leaders intended. Unfortunate because this feels pretty wasted, really, being an early adopter to get this Kron. Anyway, I think that about covers it. So again, the infographic here is going to be up on my Discord. But look forward to your comments, discussing it with you guys on Discord, wherever you guys should find me. We'll talk about it on my next stream, all of that, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you for watching this, and if you enjoyed, please hit like on the video. Hit subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Really appreciate your support. The channel keeps on right on growing, so thank you guys. And clearly you guys are putting the message out. It's not enough that you enjoy the content. You're going on out there and telling your mom, telling your friends, putting it in the holiday cards, putting it on the graffiti that you put on the walls wherever you should do that. And I appreciate it, guys, because the word is getting out there. So thank you, really. Until next time, it's been real. It's been awesome. Been real awesome. Take care.